So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, I guess. Going into my trip this year, I wasn't having a spectacular semester. I think in a lot of ways this was one of the most challenging semesters that I've had at Georgetown in terms of academically, extracurricular-wise, and in all of my friendships and relationships, because I was coming back from abroad and adjusting back to that was incredibly difficult. And in the weeks leading up to ABP, more than anything, while I at times felt lost and all of those things that happen on a college campus, I think the thing that hit me the most was that I was feeling incredibly apathetic about nearly everything. Like, I didn't really care about my classes, I didn't really care about, I wasn't exactly enthused about anything, but particularly in the context of going on ABP, I wasn't enthralled like I was in the previous years. So I was kind of hoping for that week to re-energize me and make me more excited about things again. So I wrote in my letter as we were about to go off on that week, I hope this trip gives me a reason to be excited and passionate again, and I hope that this trip will remind me of the innate goodness of Georgetown students. So yes, I'm quite sappy, but when I read that letter after I came back from the trip, it did exactly that, and there were experiences throughout the week and just moments that gave me that sort of faith and a sense of excitement. So on Tuesday night of my trip, we met with Dr. Alan Kaufman, who was a pediatrician in Chattanooga, who was working to just change. I don't know. He was an amazing person who was working to help bridge health disparities in Chattanooga. And I'm not at all interested in science and biology, so it could have been something that didn't really speak to me. But then at the end of his talk, he started talking about how no matter what you do, the fact that I am a Georgetown student gives me the opportunity to take risks and be excited about things and be passionate. And I had heard things like that before, but that coming at that particular moment in my life was really important to me. And that's the sort of things that happen on ABP. On Thursday night, there was this magical moment, or Thursday afternoon, there was this magical moment where we were waiting a couple of minutes before we could meet with a community partner. So I walked into this art gallery to kill a few minutes, and it ended up being an art gallery that had paintings painted by people experiencing homelessness that we were working with at the Chattanooga Community Kitchen. And then those very people, they invited us to come to an art class the next day and then go to a service that was incredibly powerful and just one of those magical moments that I can't imagine not happening anywhere else on that kind of trip. And then on Friday night, as we drove on our way to dinner, this Kelly Clarkson song came on in our van, and everyone, without planning it, without really talking about it, just started belting along for the next 20 minutes. Those are the kinds of experiences that have really driven my ABP experience, and as I got to the end of this week, I started thinking not just about that particular trip and what it had meant to me, but looking back over the last 3 years that I've done ABP, from being a participant, going to Harlan my freshman year, from leading as a sophomore, going to Fort Smith, and then last year going to Chattanooga. I think more than anything, this program has been incredibly formative for me, just because of the questions that it's challenged me to ask, and because through my 3 years and every single week, every single year, I can really plot my progress as a person, and see myself sort of growing. So I think as I reflect a little bit on what all of these mean, these very broad terms, I think that is the ability for ABP to energize and ask challenging deep questions and create a loving and cherishing community. I think that's what Cura Personalis means. That's what care for the whole person means. The fact that I had the ability to sort of string together these experiences and create an art that there was a space open for me to do that during reflection. I think that's what contemplation and action, that's how that's sort of operationalized. And when you guys are all thinking a little bit about like what these trips mean to you, I think we've all heard these sort of AV pillars and these ABS practices and these Jesuit values a lot, but I think reflecting a little bit about what those mean in terms of like very personal, emotional moments is the best way to sort of think about what the big picture of AV is, why we're all here doing it.
We see all these values every single year put up on a PowerPoint. I think I still have this little card that lists all the AS best practices from like 2 years ago. And I think it's very easy for them to sort of lose their meanings. We don't really reflect on them and think back on, what from our past trips brought us back here today as leaders. And for me, it's really useful to think about some of the particularly stellar individuals that I interact with, just like Shivaj talked about on my 3 trips that I've been on. This past year, I led the environmental justice trip to Harlan, Kentucky, and it was a really wonderful experience, and in great part because just like all of us have, we on my trip interacted with some really incredible individuals. And one person that I always think about specifically from this trip was this guy Willie, someone I've probably talked to somebody about before, someone I think that I talked about during the story share, just because he's so incredible. But he is a community organizer in Harlan, or not in Harlan, he's in Southwest Virginia, with an organization called Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards. And they effectively, they take on a bunch of projects looking at how folks in the community can sort of use their own powers as individuals together to ameliorate some of the health impacts that they've felt in these communities due to coal mining and mountaintop removal, how they can take legal action against corporations when they're being negligent. And all of that, he can talk about his work for hours, and it's really fascinating. But one thing that he said that really stood out to me was when he was talking about these bumper stickers that you see all over town that all say, coal keeps the lights on, friends of coal. They're everywhere. And, he's been living in this little town for, I want to say, all of his life. And he thought for the longest time when he was, working as a community organizer that when his neighbors, would put these bumper stickers on their car, things like coal keeps the lights on, he felt like they were a personal jab at himself. But then, as the years went on, he realized that, within the sort of complex context of the coal industry, that these were, had nothing to do with him. What they were like a way of saying that that person loved their brother, or their uncle, or their father. And the fact that he was able to recognize this and internalize this and take on this sensitivity towards the complexity of the situation really, really resonated with me. So I think it's so hard, when we get invested in these issues to remember how complex they are. Willie, definitely stands out to me as embodying, the AS best practices. He challenged his perspective. He asked why. He was, comfortable being uncomfortable. All of these things that we talk about all the time, but that are so hard to remember unless we have these actual figures who embody them. Just like Shivaj was talking about. I know that these are the people that bring us into this room today, and I think these are the people that, if we remember as we're sending emails and trying to do contracts, doing all the other logistical things that become less than fun, that these are the folks that I think will bring us back to the big picture of why we're here in the first place. This year is an interesting year, I think, for all of us on the board, because I think all these interactions with people just like Willie made us really, really have a hard time deciding whether to be a leader or to be on the board. Because in some ways it is a little bit heartbreaking to not be able to be a leader. But this year, what we're all trying to do is, in our roles, is sort of trying to keep everything logistically on track and make sure that everything gets actually done so that the trips can go out. We really also want to be here to unite everyone in this, in remembering that we're here because of these things. That beyond all the emailing and logistics, these are the things that keep us here. These are the things that motivate us to be here. So we're going to work really hard to be that for you guys, and help you all remember these things along the way. Without further ado, I think we'll transition into the even greater big